The massive space station called Kepler-9 floated in the darkness between stars. Inside its main chamber, representatives from 47 different alien races gathered around a circular table that seemed to stretch forever. The air felt heavy with worry and fear. Holographic displays showed the same terrible images over and over again. Planets turning to dust, fleets of ships disappearing, and entire colonies going silent. Commander Jake Morrison sat in his chair and watched the chaos unfold. Next to him, diplomat Lisa Grant whispered updates about which alien species was yelling at which. They were the only two humans in the entire room, and Jake could feel dozens of eyes glancing at them with barely hidden contempt. The Zenthari High Commander, a massive creature named Zalthor with 6 arms and scales that shimmered like oil, slammed 3 of his fists on the table. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. His voice came out as a deep growl that the translation device in Jake's ear converted to rough English. The Void Swarm has taken another world. Thessia 7 is gone. 3 billion Calorian citizens consumed in less than 6 hours. We must act now, or we will all share their fate. A Calorian elder, her crystalline body glowing faint blue with grief, stood slowly. Her species looked like walking sculptures made of living glass. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. My people have fought the swarm for 3 months. Nothing stops it. Our weapons pass through it like water. Our shields collapse in seconds. It learns from every attack we make and adapts faster than we can change our tactics. The chamber erupted into arguments. The Draven Confederation representatives, reptilian warriors covered in battle scars, demanded an immediate military strike with every ship the Council could gather. The Corrosian Union diplomats, tall and elegant with skin that changed colors based on their emotions, argued for evacuation protocols instead. The Vorlian merchants, small furry creatures with oversized eyes, worried about trade routes and economic collapse. Jake leaned back in his chair and listened. He had been a naval officer for 15 years before Earth joined the galactic community, and he knew panic when he saw it. These aliens, despite their advanced technology and thousands of years of space travel, were terrified. They had no plan, no strategy, just fear. Lisa touched his arm gently. She was younger than Jake, only 32 years old, but she had a talent for reading people that extended even to alien species. Her brown eyes met his, and she raised an eyebrow in a silent question. Jake stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, and several alien heads turned toward him. He cleared his throat. Earth would like to offer assistance. Our fleet may be small, but we have experience with unconventional warfare. We could send reconnaissance ships to gather intelligence on the swarm's movements and patterns. For a moment, complete silence filled the chamber. Then Zalthor began to laugh. It was a deep rumbling sound that shook the air. Other representatives joined in, and soon the entire room filled with alien laughter in a dozen different pitches and tones. Zalthor's translator crackled. Reconnaissance? From Earth? You have been part of this council for barely 15 years. Your ships use chemical propulsion. Your weapons are still kinetic projectiles. You are children playing with toys while adults face extinction. A few other representatives nodded in agreement. One of the Vorlian merchants spoke up, his squeaky voice somehow managing to sound condescending. No offense intended, Commander Morrison, but Earth's military capabilities are perhaps a century behind the rest of the Council. Your presence here is a courtesy, not a necessity. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain calm. Lisa stood beside him, her face carefully neutral despite the insult. The arbiter of the Council, a Corrosian named Marilyn, whose skin currently showed frustrated orange swirls, raised her hand for silence. Her voice carried authority that cut through the laughter. Let us maintain decorum. Commander Morrison, while we appreciate Earth's willingness to contribute, the Council has decided that military operations will be coordinated by our more experienced members. Earth's limited understanding of interstellar warfare makes participation difficult at this time. It was a polite way of saying the same thing Zalthor had said with mockery. Jake sat down slowly, keeping his face blank. Lisa followed suit, but he could see her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. The meeting continued for 3 more hours. The Council formed a coalition fleet combining ships from the Zenthari Empire, the Draven Confederation, and a dozen other major powers. They drew up battle plans and defensive positions. They calculated fleet movements and supply lines. Through it all, Earth was not mentioned once. They had been dismissed, set aside like children who needed to stay out of the way while adults worked. When the session finally ended, Jake and Lisa walked through the station's long corridors back to their diplomatic quarters. The halls were made of some material that looked like polished marble, but felt warm to the touch. Other aliens passed them by, most not bothering to acknowledge the humans at all. Inside their quarters, a modest suite with 2 bedrooms and a common area, Lisa finally let her frustration show. She threw her datapad onto the couch and ran her hands through her short black hair. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. 3 billion people just died and they're worried about protecting their pride. Jake poured himself a glass of water from the dispenser. The station's water tasted faintly metallic, but it was better than nothing. He took a long drink before responding. They're scared. Fear makes people stupid, even aliens who think they're smarter than us. So what do we do? Just sit here and watch while they get slaughtered? Jake set down his glass and pulled out his secure communication device. It was human technology, encrypted in ways the other council races had never seen. He typed a quick message and sent it on a tight beam transmission to Earth, 23 light-years away. We do exactly what we planned to do if they rejected our help. Lisa looked at the device, then back at Jake. Her eyes widened slightly as understanding dawned. Admiral Hayes, Operation Silent Guardian. Jake nodded slowly. We've been preparing for this exact scenario for 8 months. The council thinks we're too primitive to help. Let's let them keep thinking that. He typed another command and a holographic display appeared above the device. It showed the Void Swarm's projected path and dozens of small green dots representing Earth's deep space reconnaissance network. The other council races had no idea those drones even existed. While they're busy forming committees and arguing about tactics, we're already gathering real intelligence. And if what Admiral Hayes suspects is true, we might be the only species in this galaxy that can actually stop this thing. Lisa sat down slowly, processing the implications. And if we succeed? Jake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then maybe next time they'll think twice before calling us children. Outside their window, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Void Swarm was moving closer to the heart of galactic civilization, and somewhere even farther away, Earth was preparing to do what everyone else thought was impossible. The game had begun, and humanity was playing by its own rules. The lunar command station hung in orbit above Earth's moon like a metal spiderweb, stretched across the darkness. Inside its central operations room, Admiral Peter Hayes stood before a massive holographic display that showed half the galaxy. Red markers indicated where the Void Swarm had struck. Yellow markers showed its projected path, and scattered throughout the display, invisible to everyone but Earth's military, were tiny green dots representing humanity's secret reconnaissance network. Peter was 62 years old with gray hair and lines on his face that spoke of decades spent making difficult decisions. He had commanded submarines in the Pacific before Earth made first contact with aliens, and he still thought like a submarine captain, silent, careful, and always 3 steps ahead of the enemy. Captain Ryan Webb stood beside him, studying the display with intense focus. Ryan was younger, only 38, with sharp blue eyes and the kind of calm demeanor that made other officers trust him instinctively. He had been handpicked to lead Earth's deep space fleet, all 30 ships that humanity could spare for this mission. "Sir, the latest data from the stealth drones confirms it," Ryan said, gesturing at the display. "The Void Swarm isn't random. Look at the pattern." Peter leaned closer. The red markers formed a path that curved through space in an arc that seemed almost deliberate. Each attack came exactly 72 hours after the previous one. Each target was a major population center or industrial hub. Nothing about this was natural. "Show me the energy analysis," Peter ordered. Ryan tapped a command into the holographic interface. New information appeared, showing energy signatures and frequency patterns. A woman's voice spoke from behind them. "The swarm responds to specific broadcasts. Radio waves, subspace communications, anything above a certain energy threshold attracts it like blood and water." Dr. Helen Price stepped up to join them. She was Earth's leading expert on alien technology, a position she had earned by being smarter than almost everyone else in the room, and twice as stubborn. Her red hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore a lab coat covered in coffee stains. "The other galactic races communicate constantly," Helen continued. "Their ships broadcast identification signals every few seconds. Their colonies pump out energy signatures that can be detected from light years away. They might as well be ringing dinner bells for this thing. Peter crossed his arms. But our drones don't get detected. Exactly. Quantum masking technology. We learned it from studying that crashed Vorlian scout ship 12 years ago, remember? The one they said was impossible to salvage? Well, we salvaged it. Reverse engineered their stealth systems and made them better. Our drones are ghosts. The swarm can't see them because they don't emit any energy signature at all. Ryan pulled up another image. This one showed a detailed scan of a single void swarm entity. It looked like a massive black sphere covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Smaller spheres orbited around it in complex patterns. What are we looking at? Peter asked. This is the interesting part, Helen said, her eyes lighting up with the excitement of someone explaining a puzzle they had just solved. Each entity is connected to the others through a network of quantum-entangled particles. They share information instantly across any distance. When one learns something, they all learn it. When one detects a target, they all move toward it. It's a hive mind, but the coordination comes from somewhere else. Peter's eyes narrowed. A central control system. Has to be. We've mapped the communication patterns and everything points back to a specific region of space about 40 light years from here. Something is giving orders, and the swarm entities are just following commands. Ryan understood immediately. So if we can find the source and shut it down, the swarm becomes just a bunch of dumb drones floating in space, Helen finished. No coordination, no adaptation, no threat. Peter walked around the holographic display thinking. The Galactic Council was preparing for a massive fleet battle, throwing ships and firepower at an enemy that had already proven it could adapt to any conventional attack. They would lose, and they would lose badly. Billions would die, maybe trillions. But if Earth could find and destroy the control source, the entire swarm would collapse. The war would end before it really began, and the Council would never know that humanity had saved them all. How long to retrofit our ships with the stealth technology? Peter asked. Helen pulled up a work schedule. The quantum masking systems are already installed on all 30 deep space vessels. We've been doing it quietly over the past 6 months. But I've also developed something new. I call it a frequency disruptor. She manipulated the holographic display to show a device that looked like a spinning wheel made of light. Complex equations floated around it. The swarm entities maintain their connection through specific quantum frequencies. This device generates interference on those exact frequencies. In theory, it should break their connection to each other and to the central control. They'll be blind, deaf, and dumb for as long as we keep the disruptor active. In theory? Peter raised an eyebrow. I can't exactly test it on real void swarm entities until we're actually out there shooting at them, sir. But the math works. I'm 90% certain. Ryan smiled slightly. I've worked with worse odds. Peter looked at both of them, then at the holographic display showing the path of destruction the swarm was carving through the galaxy. He thought about Jake Morrison and Lisa Grant sitting in that council chamber, being laughed at by aliens who thought humanity was too primitive to matter. Let them laugh. Let them think Earth was weak and helpless. Pride was a luxury humanity had never been able to afford. They had spent their entire history being underestimated, and they had learned to use that to their advantage. Captain Webb, you'll take command of the task force. 30 ships, full stealth configuration. Communications blackout once you leave Earth orbit. The Council can't know we're involved. Understood, sir. Dr. Price, I want those frequency disruptors installed on every ship within 48 hours. I don't care if your people have to work around the clock. They're already working around the clock, Admiral. Has been for weeks. Peter allowed himself a small smile. Good. Then make it 24 hours. Helen saluted and hurried off toward the engineering bay, already shouting orders into her communication device. Ryan remained standing at attention, waiting for his final orders. Sir, what if we fail? Ryan asked quietly. What if the disruptors don't work or we can't find the control source in time? Peter looked at the younger man. Ryan deserved an honest answer. Then the galaxy burns, Captain. The Council will fight their battle and lose. Trillions will die, and Earth will probably be consumed along with everyone else. He paused. But if we do nothing, that happens anyway. At least this way we have a chance. And if we succeed, the Council will want to know what happened. They'll demand answers. Then we give them the same answer humanity has always given to people who underestimate us. We smile politely and say nothing. Let them wonder. Let them guess. Mystery is its own kind of power. Ryan nodded slowly, understanding the game they were playing. When do we launch? 72 hours. That gives us time to finish the retrofits and plot the optimal intercept course. You'll leave the solar system on a trajectory that looks like a standard patrol route. Once you're clear of the inner planets, go dark and make for the swarm's last known position. Rules of engagement? Peter's face hardened. The Void Swarm has killed trillions. It will kill trillions more if we don't stop it. You are authorized to use any and all necessary force. Find that control source and destroy it, Captain, no matter what it takes. Yes, sir. Ryan saluted and left the operations room. Peter stood alone in front of the holographic display, watching the red markers spread across the galaxy like a disease. He thought about all the aliens who had dismissed Earth as primitive and worthless. He thought about the laughter in that council chamber when Jake suggested helping. They would learn. One way or another, they would learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been its technology or its weapons. It was the ability to do what needed to be done, quietly and efficiently, without needing applause or recognition. Earth didn't need the galaxy to know what happened. Earth just needed the galaxy to survive. He touched a control, and the holographic display zoomed in on the region where Helen believed the control source was located. It was a dead system with 3 burned-out planets orbiting a dying star. Nothing living had existed there for millions of years. Perfect place to hide something you never wanted found. Let's see what secrets you're keeping, Peter whispered to the display. Outside the station's windows, Earth hung in space like a blue marble. Humanity's home. Worth protecting, worth fighting for, and very soon worth underestimating at your own peril. The Coalition fleet gathered at the Tertian Belt, a region of space filled with asteroids and ice chunks that formed a natural defensive barrier. 247 warships from a dozen different species floated in formation, their shields glowing faint blue against the darkness. It was the largest military force the Galactic Council had assembled in 3,000 years. High Commander Zalthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Triumph. The ship stretched nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and covered in armor plating that could withstand a direct hit from a nuclear explosion. Around him, Xanthari officers worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. "Status report," Zalthor commanded. His tactical officer, a younger Xanthari with silver scales, looked up from his console. "All ships report ready, Commander. Long-range sensors detect the Void Swarm approaching at 0.7 light speed. They will reach our position in 1 hour and 17 minutes. Zalthor nodded. The plan was simple. Hold the line at the Tertian Belt, use the asteroids as cover, and hammer the swarm with concentrated fire from multiple angles. The combined firepower of the Coalition fleet should be enough to at least slow the enemy down, buy time for more ships to arrive from the inner systems. Should be enough. That phrase bothered him more than he wanted to admit. On the display screens, the Void Swarm appeared as a dark cloud that seemed to swallow the stars behind it. Thousands of black spheres moving in perfect synchronization, like a school of fish that could tear planets apart. They had destroyed 9 worlds already, killed over 7 trillion beings, and shown no signs of slowing down. "All ships, this is High Commander Zalthor. Today we stand between the swarm and our homes. Today we prove that the civilized races of this galaxy will not go quietly into extinction. Hold your positions, trust your training, and remember those we have already lost. Victory or death, there is no third option." Responses came back from every ship in the fleet. The Draven Confederation ships replied with battle roars. The Calorian vessels sent harmonized chimes of acknowledgement. Even the small Vorlian frigates chirped their readiness. The hour passed slowly. Every officer on every bridge watched their screens, counting down the minutes. When the swarm finally came into visual range, several crew members gasped despite their training. The images from destroyed colonies had not done justice to the reality of facing the swarm in person. "All weapons charged," the tactical officer reported. "Targeting solutions locked. Fire at will," Zalthor ordered. The Coalition fleet opened up with everything they had. Plasma cannons, particle beams, quantum torpedoes, and kinetic accelerators all fired simultaneously. The space between the fleet and the swarm lit up like a star-going supernova. Explosions rippled across the front ranks of the swarm, destroying dozens of the black spheres in the first salvo. For a moment, hope flickered in Zalthor's chest. Maybe they could win this. Maybe the concentrated firepower was enough. Then the swarm adapted. The black spheres shifted their formation. spreading out and rotating in complex patterns. The next salvo of weapons fire passed through gaps in their formation, or impacted shields that had not existed seconds before. The spheres that had been destroyed were already being replaced by others moving up from the rear. "Swarm entities returning fire," someone shouted. Black beams of energy lanced out from the swarm, striking coalition ships with terrifying precision. The Draven Confederation cruiser warrior's Pride took 3 direct hits. Its shields collapsed, its armor melted, and its reactor went critical. The resulting explosion took out 2 more ships that had been flying in close formation. The battle turned into chaos. The swarm flowed around the asteroids like water, surrounding the coalition fleet from multiple directions. Every tactic Zalthor tried, the swarm countered within minutes. They learned from each attack and adjusted their defenses accordingly. A Calorian destroyer exploded to his left. A Xanthari frigate went dark to his right. The casualty reports kept coming faster and faster. "Commander, we have lost 37 ships. Shield strength at 60%. Weapon systems overheating." Zalthor watched his carefully planned defensive line fall apart. The swarm was not just winning, it was annihilating them. In less than an hour, they had lost nearly 40% of the fleet. At this rate, there would be nothing left within another hour. Pride warred with survival instinct in his mind. The Xanthari did not retreat. The Xanthari had never retreated in 5,000 years of military history. But the Xanthari had also never faced an enemy like this. "All ships fall back to Sanctuary Station. Fighting retreat pattern Delta. We need to regroup and reassess." The order tasted like poison in his mouth, but he gave it anyway. The surviving ships of the coalition fleet began pulling back, still firing as they retreated. The swarm pursued relentlessly, destroying more ships with every passing minute. By the time the remnants of the fleet reached Sanctuary Station 3 hours later, they had lost 96 ships and over 300,000 crew members. The once mighty coalition fleet was broken, demoralized, and terrified. On Kepler 9, the Galactic Council gathered for an emergency session. The atmosphere in the chamber was completely different from before. No one argued. No one shouted. They sat in stunned silence as casualty reports scrolled across display screens. Arbiter Marilyn's skin had turned a deep purple, the color of Corrosion mourning. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. "Projections show the swarm will reach the core worlds in 10 days. We do not have enough ships to stop them. We do not have enough time to evacuate. I am open to suggestions." High Commander Zalthor, attending the meeting remotely from his damaged flagship, looked like he had aged a century in one day. 2 of his 6 arms were bandaged, injured during the battle. "We could use Omega weapons," he said quietly. "Planet killers. Destroy our own worlds before the swarm reaches them. Deny them the victory." The chamber erupted in horrified protests. Marilyn raised her hand for silence. "We will not discuss genocide against our own people. There must be another way." "There is no other way," a Draven general growled. "We are outmatched. We cannot adapt fast enough. The swarm learns from everything we do. It is like fighting an enemy that knows our every move before we make it." Lisa Grant sat in Earth's seat, listening to the despair in every voice. Jake Morrison had returned to Earth 3 days ago for consultations, leaving her alone to represent humanity. She wanted to help, wanted to offer some kind of hope, but what could Earth possibly do that these advanced civilizations could not? Her communication device vibrated silently. She glanced down at the message from Jake. It contained only coordinates and a timestamp. Sector 947. 72 hours from now. Lisa did not understand what it meant, but she trusted Jake completely. They had worked together for 5 years, and he had never steered her wrong. She stood up slowly. Every alien head turned toward her. Earth suggests that Council members monitor long-range sensors in Sector 947 over the next 72 hours. Something interesting may occur there. Zalthor's translator crackled with what might have been a bitter laugh. Something interesting? The galaxy is ending and Earth speaks in riddles. I am simply conveying information from my government, Commander. Do with it what you will. Marilyn studied Lisa with those color-changing eyes. Earth has been very quiet during this crisis. Suspiciously quiet. Earth is doing what Earth does best, Arbiter. We are watching, learning, and trying to help where we can. By watching a random sector of space, Lisa sat back down. Sometimes the best help comes from unexpected places. The Council continued debating options for another 3 hours. Evacuation plans, last stand scenarios, desperate gambits involving weapons they had sworn never to use. Nothing offered real hope. They were just going through the motions, pretending they had control over a situation that had already spiraled beyond their ability to manage. When the session ended, a young Carosian diplomat named Velana approached Lisa. Her skin showed curious yellow swirls. "I do not understand your people," Velana said softly. "The galaxy faces extinction, and Earth offers cryptic messages about watching empty sectors of space. What are you planning?" Lisa smiled slightly. "I honestly do not know, but I know my colleague Jake Morrison, and he does not waste words. If he says something interesting will happen, then something interesting will happen. You have great faith in your people. We have been underestimated for our entire history as a species. We have learned to use that to our advantage." Velana's skin shifted to thoughtful orange. "Perhaps the galaxy has much to learn from Earth." "Perhaps," Lisa agreed. "Or perhaps the galaxy will never know what Earth has to teach." She walked back to her quarters thinking about the message from Jake. 72 hours. Sector 947. Somewhere out there in the darkness, humanity was doing something. Something the Council could not see. Something they would not understand. Lisa looked out the window at the stars and allowed herself a small smile. The game was not over yet. Captain Ryan Webb stood on the bridge of the ECS Defiant, watching displays that showed nothing but empty space. His ship and the 29 others in Earth's task force had been running completely dark for 11 days, their quantum masking, systems making them invisible to every sensor in the galaxy. They were ghosts, floating in the darkness like predators waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The bridge was quiet. His crew worked at their stations with practiced silence, communicating through hand signals and whispered words. Sound did not travel in space, but habits from submarine warfare died hard. When you were trying to be invisible, even small habits of silence felt right. Lieutenant Karen Hughes sat at the tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. She was the best weapons officer Ryan had ever worked with, able to calculate firing solutions in her head faster than most computers. "Target Cluster Alpha is in position," she whispered. "All 30 swarm entities are within optimal range. They have not detected us." Ryan nodded. The swarm cluster floated 300 kilometers ahead, thousands of black spheres moving in perfect formation. They were heading toward the sanctuary station where the remains of the Galactic Council's fleet was making their last stand. They had no idea that 30 Earth ships were positioned all around them in a 3-dimensional grid pattern. "Status on frequency disruptors?" Ryan asked. Dr. Helen Price, who had insisted on coming along for the mission, looked up from her engineering console. She had lost weight during the journey, surviving on coffee and nervous energy, but her eyes still held that fierce intelligence that made her the best in her field. "All 30 ships report disruptors charged and ready. The targeting synchronization is holding steady. When we activate, we will hit every swarm entity simultaneously from multiple angles." "And if your theory is wrong?" Helen smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Then we will all die horribly and the galaxy will never know we tried. But my theory is not wrong, Captain. The math is solid." Ryan trusted her. He had to. They had come too far to doubt now. "All ships, this is Defiant Actual. Activate disruptors on my mark." 3, 2, 1 mark. Across the invisible formation, 30 Earth ships activated their frequency disruptors simultaneously. The effect was not visible to the human eye, but it was devastating to the void swarm entities. The disruptors generated interference on the exact quantum frequencies the swarm used to communicate, and suddenly, thousands of entities that had been moving as one perfect organism found themselves cut off from each other. The swarm cluster stopped moving. The black spheres drifted aimlessly, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos. They tried to adapt, tried to reconnect, but the disruptors were too strong and too precisely calibrated. "Disruptors holding steady," Helen reported. "The swarm entities are isolated from each other and from their central control. They are blind." "Weapons free," Ryan ordered. "Fire at will." The 30 Earth ships opened fire. They used kinetic railguns and concentrated laser arrays, weapons that left minimal energy signatures but were devastatingly effective. The railguns fired metal slugs at relativistic speeds. each impact releasing energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The laser arrays focused beams that could slice through the swarm entities like hot knives through butter. The blind swarm entities could not dodge. They could not adapt. They could not even coordinate a defense. One by one, they were destroyed. Black spheres exploded silently in space, their remains scattering into the void. It took 6 hours to destroy the entire cluster. When it was done, over 3,000 swarm entities had been eliminated, roughly 30% of the total swarm force. The space around them was filled with debris. All ships report successful engagement, Lieutenant Hughes said. 0 casualties. Minimal ammunition expended. Ryan allowed himself to breathe. The disruptors worked. Helen's theory was correct. Humanity now had a weapon that could fight the Void Swarm on equal terms. Send the signal, Ryan ordered. Begin Operation Ghost Knife. The task force split into smaller groups, 5 ships per group, 6 groups total. They spread out across the swarm's territory, hunting for clusters to destroy. They moved like wolves, striking from the shadows and vanishing before the swarm could respond. Over the next 11 days, Ryan's task force worked its way through the swarm's forces. They would find a cluster, surround it, activate the disruptors, and systematically destroy every entity. Then they would move to the next target. Strike and fade, hit and run. Classic guerrilla warfare tactics adapted for space combat. The swarm tried to adapt. It changed formations, varied its routes, increased its patrol patterns. But the swarm could not defend against an enemy it could not see. Earth's quantum masking technology kept them invisible, and by the time the swarm detected an attack, it was already over. On the 12th day, Ryan's sensor operator reported something unusual. Captain, I am picking up strange readings from the target system. High levels of quantum activity emanating from the third moon. It matches the signature of the command signals we have been tracking. Ryan studied the readings. The system was dead. 3 burned planets orbiting a dying red star. Nothing lived there. Nothing had lived there for millions of years. But on the third moon of the second planet, something was broadcasting. That is the source, Helen said, looking at the data. It has to be. The control system for the entire swarm. Ryan made his decision instantly. All ships converge on these coordinates. We are going to end this. The 30 Earth ships regrouped and made their way to the dead system. They found the moon easily, a gray ball of rock with no atmosphere and no life. Deep scans revealed a structure buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface. It was ancient beyond measure, built by a civilization that had died out long before humanity had learned to make fire. It is still active, Helen reported. The structure is broadcasting command signals on quantum frequencies. Every swarm entity in the galaxy is receiving instructions from this location. Can we destroy it from orbit? Not recommended. The structure is heavily shielded and buried deep. We would need to use tactical nuclear weapons, which would create energy signatures that would alert the entire galaxy to our presence. Ryan considered the options. They had come too far to fail now because they wanted to stay hidden. But there might be another way. Prepare boarding teams. We are going in. 2 hours later, Ryan led a team of 20 Marines through the tunnels beneath the moon's surface. They wore powered armor and carried weapons designed for close combat. The tunnels were dark, carved from solid rock by machines that had long since turned to dust. They found the control center deep in the heart of the moon. It was a massive chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with faint light. At the center stood a pillar that reached from floor to ceiling, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. That is it, Helen said, scanning the pillar with her equipment. The master control. Destroy that, and the swarm loses all coordination. Ryan did not hesitate. Set charges, every ounce of explosive we brought. I want this place reduced to atoms. The Marines worked quickly, placing shaped charges around the pillar and throughout the chamber. When they finished, Ryan checked the timer. Everyone out, we have 5 minutes. They ran back through the tunnels, reached the surface, and scrambled aboard the shuttles. The ships retreated to a safe distance. Ryan counted down the final seconds. The explosion was not visible from space, but sensors detected it easily. The entire moon shook as the charges detonated deep inside. The control center collapsed, the crystalline structures shattered, and the ancient pillar that had been broadcasting commands for millions of years finally went dark. Across the galaxy, every void swarm entity stopped moving. Cut off from their master control, they simply drifted in space like abandoned toys. The threat was over. Ryan sat in his command chair and felt exhaustion wash over him. They had done it. 30 ships and a handful of brave people had saved the galaxy from extinction. "Send a message to Admiral Hayes," Ryan ordered. "Tell him Operation Ghost Knife is complete. The swarm is neutralized." Lieutenant Hughes smiled. "What about the Galactic Council? Should we inform them?" Ryan shook his head. "They will figure it out on their own. Let them wonder what happened." "Ghost Knife is a good name for this operation," Helen said quietly. "We cut the threat out of the galaxy and no one even knew we were there." Ryan looked at the display showing the dead moon and the remains of the ancient control system. Somewhere out there, aliens were celebrating their survival. They would analyze the data, study the patterns, and try to understand what had happened to the Void Swarm. And they would never know that humanity had saved them all. "Take us home," Ryan ordered. "Mission accomplished." Sanctuary Station's operations center looked like organized chaos. Dozens of alien species crowded around holographic displays, watching with disbelief as the Void Swarm simply stopped moving. One moment the black spheres were advancing toward the core worlds, unstoppable and terrifying. The next moment they went still, floating in space like dead satellites. High Commander Zalthor stood frozen at his command console, all 6 of his arms hanging limp at his sides. His tactical officers checked and rechecked their sensor readings, convinced there must be some mistake. "Confirm scan," Zalthor ordered, his voice hoarse. "Confirmed, Commander. All swarm entities have ceased activity. No energy signatures detected. No movement. They are completely inert." A Draven general who had been preparing evacuation plans looked up from her console. "What could cause this? Do we have any new weapons in the field we do not know about?" "Negative. All coalition forces are accounted for. We have no ships in the sectors where the swarm activity stopped." Arbiter Moralen arrived at the operations center, her skin flashing through confused colors, yellow to green to purple to orange, unable to settle on a single emotion because she felt them all at once. "Someone explain what is happening," she demanded. A Calorian scientist stepped forward, his crystalline body reflecting the light from a dozen displays. "Arbiter, we have analyzed the timeline. The swarm began losing coordination approximately 11 days ago. Discrete clusters were destroyed over a period of days, followed by a catastrophic failure of the entire network. Whatever happened, it was systematic and deliberate. Destroyed by what? By whom? Unknown. We detect no energy signatures consistent with any known weapons. No ships, no fleets, nothing. It is as if the swarm was destroyed by ghosts." Zalthor pulled up long-range sensor data. Analysis shows massive debris fields in sectors 7 through 14. Each field contains the remains of hundreds of swarm entities. The pattern suggests coordinated strikes from multiple angles. "But there were no ships in those sectors," the Draven general insisted. "Exactly. Either our sensors failed across half the galaxy simultaneously, or something attacked the swarm using technology we cannot detect." Moralen felt a memory tug at her mind, something one of the human representatives had said 3 days ago, just before everything changed. She pulled up the council session records and found Lisa Grant's statement. "Earth suggests monitoring Sector 947, she read aloud. "Something interesting may occur there." Every officer in the operations center turned to look at her. That was spoken 72 hours before the first swarm cluster was destroyed. Moralen continued. "And the first attack occurred in Sector 947, exactly where the humans said something interesting would happen." Zalthor's scales shifted to a darker shade of red, the Zenthari equivalent of suspicion mixed with grudging respect. "Coincidence? I do not believe in coincidences of that magnitude, Commander." Within the hour, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber buzzed with conversation as representatives compared notes and theories. Everyone had noticed the same thing. The swarm had been systematically destroyed by forces that should not exist. Jake Morrison and Lisa Grant sat in Earth's seat, watching the chaos with carefully neutral expressions. Lisa had briefed Jake the moment he returned from Earth, and together they had prepared for this exact situation. Marilyn called the session to order. The Void Swarm has been neutralized. The threat to our civilization is over. However, we have no explanation for how this occurred. I am opening the floor to theories. A Vorlian representative, his fur standing on end with excitement, spoke first. Perhaps the ancient precursors intervened. Legends speak of their technology being far beyond our understanding. The precursors have been extinct for millions of years, a Calorian elder countered. Perhaps it was a natural phenomenon, some kind of quantum decay in the swarm structure. Natural phenomena do not follow coordinated attack patterns. The arguments continued for 20 minutes before Zalthor stood. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what question he was going to ask. The human representatives predicted this outcome. They told us to watch specific coordinates at a specific time. I would very much like to know how they knew what would happen. All eyes turned to Jake and Lisa. Jake stood slowly, taking his time, letting the silence stretch. He had practiced this moment in his mind a dozen times. Earth deployed reconnaissance assets to gather intelligence on the Void Swarm, as any responsible member species would. Our drones observed certain patterns and made projections about when and where the swarm might experience coordination failures. Coordination failures, Zalthor repeated flatly. Is that what we are calling the complete destruction of an unstoppable enemy? We observed what we observed, Commander. Our analysis suggested the swarm was operating on an ancient automated system that might be vulnerable to disruption. Whether that analysis was correct or whether some other factor was involved, we cannot say with certainty. How convenient that Earth's drones were in position to observe these failures across multiple sectors simultaneously. Jake met the Zenthari's gaze without flinching. Earth's technology may be primitive, Commander, but we are very good at staying quiet and watching. Sometimes the best way to contribute is to gather information, rather than charging forward into battle. Lisa stood beside Jake. Our government is preparing a full report on our reconnaissance findings. The data will be shared with the Council's scientific community, so that all member species can benefit from our observations. The chamber erupted into discussion. Some representatives were suspicious, demanding more answers. Others were simply grateful the threat was over, and did not care about details. A few, like Velana, smiled knowingly but said nothing. Marilyn raised her hand for silence. Her skin had settled into a thoughtful blue color. The Council officially thanks Earth for its reconnaissance contributions during this crisis. Given the value of the intelligence provided, we are prepared to offer Earth certain considerations. Jake and Lisa exchanged a glance. They had not expected this. What kind of considerations? Jake asked carefully. First, Earth's military will be granted full participation in all future coalition operations. No more exclusions based on technological assessments. Second, Earth's petition for additional colony rights in the Andromeda sector is approved effective immediately. Third, Earth's council seat will be moved from the outer ring to the middle tier. Lisa felt her heart race. These were significant concessions, things Earth had been requesting for years without success. They represented a massive upgrade in humanity's status within the galactic community. The council is very generous, Jake said. Earth accepts these considerations with gratitude. Do not misunderstand, Zalthor said, his voice rough. We are grateful the swarm is gone, but we are not fools. Something happened out there. Something we do not understand. And somehow Earth was involved. Involved is a strong word, Commander. Then what word would you prefer? Jake smiled slightly. Observant. Earth was observant, and perhaps fortunate in our timing. The session ended shortly after. As Jake and Lisa prepared to leave the chamber, Velana approached them. The young Kerosian diplomat's skin showed amused orange swirls. No one knows what really happened out there, she said quietly. But Earth knows. Earth will always know. Knowledge is its own kind of power, Lisa replied. Indeed, my people have a saying. The quietest voice in the room is often the wisest. I think humanity understands this better than most. We have had a lot of practice being underestimated. Velana laughed softly. Something tells me the galaxy will not make that mistake again. 6 months later on Lunar Command Station, Admiral Peter Hayes stood in a private ceremony room with 30 people. They were the crew members of the task force that had destroyed the Void Swarm, led by Captain Ryan Webb. Before them lay newly created medals, simple circles of metal engraved with an image of Earth and a finger raised to lips in the universal gesture for silence. "These are the medals of silent service," Peter said. "They represent the highest honor Earth can bestow for actions that must never be publicly acknowledged. You saved the galaxy. You saved trillions of lives, and the galaxy will never know your names." Ryan Webb stepped forward to receive his medal. His crew followed one by one. No media attended. No cameras recorded the moment. It was a ceremony witnessed by fewer than 50 people, and every one of them had been sworn to secrecy. "Some might say this is unfair," Peter continued, "that you deserve parades and recognition. But you understood the mission when you accepted it. We did not do this for glory. We did this because it needed to be done, and we were the only ones who could do it." Dr. Helen Price, standing in the second row, smiled through tears. She had not slept properly in 6 months, haunted by nightmares of what might have happened if her calculations had been wrong. But they had not been wrong. Her frequency disruptors had worked perfectly. Earth was safe, and that was all that mattered. "The galaxy thinks they survived through luck or divine intervention," Peter said. "Let them think that. Let them wonder. Mystery is its own kind of weapon. As long as they do not understand what we are truly,